In this episode, we're chatting with Sarah Rusbatch, author of Beyond Booze, How to Create a Life You Love Alcohol-Free. Whether you're on your own journey to sobriety or supporting someone else's, this episode offers valuable insights and inspiration for creating a life you love beyond the booze. This is the Well Aware Podcast.
Hi guys, welcome to the Well Aware Podcast. I'm Dr. Lauren Grawert, Chief Medical Officer here at Aware Recovery Care. And today we have a special episode focusing on living alcohol-free and creating a life filled with joy and fulfillment. I'm thrilled to be joined by Sarah Rusbatch, author of Beyond Booze, How to Create a Life You Love Alcohol-Free. Thank you for joining us. Where does this podcast find you today?
So I am in Perth in Western Australia, but I'm from the UK, so I've been living over here for 14 years.
Wonderful, wonderful. Your book was so fascinating on many levels. I wonder if you can kind of give our listeners just a little bit about yourself in general and your background in the addiction recovery space and what inspired you to write the book.
So I am coming up to this Saturday will be my 5-year soberversary. So 5 years alcohol free on Saturday. And my drinking story started, I think, probably in the way that many do. I grew up in a house where alcohol was very present. So I often saw my parents socializing, parties. And as a little girl, what I saw was, that's how adults have fun. When adults want to see their friends, they only ever do it with alcohol because that was all that was modeled to me. A couple of other things had happened for me, and by the time I was 13, I'd been to 5 different schools. We'd moved around quite a lot, and what that meant for me as a kid was I'd learned that I had to adapt and mold myself to fit in. How I was always working out, how do I get people to like me? How do I get to become friends with the cool kids or the kids that have got same stuff in common with me? And so as a little girl, there were a couple of, though, in hindsight is a wonderful thing. Therapy is a wonderful thing. You go into doing all of this work on yourself and you can look back and see that a couple of things were going on for me there. So number one, alcohol was modeled to me as something great to do, to have fun. And secondly, I was always looking for ways to fit in and to get people to like me. So at the age of 14, when alcohol was introduced, local friends going down the park, drinking liquor out of a soda stream bottle, which was kind of what we did back then. The feedback I started getting was, oh, you're so fun when you're drunk. Oh, you're hilarious when you're drunk. And so as a kid, as a teenager, I started getting that reinforced message that alcohol was what I needed to get people to like me. So fast forward several years, university, where alcohol, and same in the UK as it is the US, very present. Every social occasion at uni is filled with alcohol. I then moved to London. I got my first job, and this was in the era of Sex and the City. We had Samantha and Carrie who were out there drinking their Cosmos, one night stands, girl power, girls can have it all. And we had a lot of female role models in the UK at the time who were drinking quite heavily and doing this with a badge of honor, like it was something to be proud of. So my drinking had always been consistent. It had always been fairly heavy, but it had never really been problematic for me. I dealt with my hangovers fairly well. I was in a successful career. I never took a day off sick from my hangovers, would think nothing of, in my 20s, going out, getting home at 3 a.m., getting up at 7 a.m., getting on the underground, back to work, working a full day, back in the pub at 6 p.m. Like, I shudder now when I think about that because I don't know how I did it. The time things changed for me was after we moved to Australia. And I then had 2 kids in quite quick succession. And all of a sudden, I was on the other side of the world. I was a mum for the first time. I wasn't working. My career wasn't. I'd left my career behind in London. I had no friends. I was trying to meet people. I had no family to support me with, I had a newborn and an 18-month-old. And anyone who's been through that will know what an absolute shit show that can be in terms of just, you get not a moment to yourself, you get no sleep, you are just constantly being pulled in every direction. But it's just monotony as well. You're just following these constant routines of pureeing food and baby rhyme time and nap time and nappy time and I was struggling. I was really, really struggling. I was homesick. I was desperately homesick. I was sad. I was confused because all I'd ever wanted was to have kids, and was so grateful for the fact that I had this beautiful, healthy baby boy and baby girl. But inside, I I felt like a part of me was just so confused about why I wasn't loving this new life. On paper, as I'm living in Australia by the beach and everything looked great, but I was really struggling. And that was when alcohol started to become a crutch. So that was when alcohol started to become something that I leaned on more and more and more.
Yeah.
And got to the point where I was looking forward to that evening drink. I was drinking on my own for the first time. I was getting a bit sneaky. The kids were getting older. My husband would take the kids out to, the park in the evening, and I would be in the pantry pouring a glass of, it was almost like I was trying to hide it from myself. If I was doing it in secret, I could pretend to myself that it wasn't happening. And I'd take these huge big glugs of red wine out of the pantry, and then I'd go back in and continue chopping the carrots as if I could pretend to myself that I hadn't just done that. And I started to notice the physical impact of alcohol on me. It was starting to, every time I drank, I couldn't sleep. So my answer to that was to take a sleeping tablet along with the alcohol so that I didn't get the 3 a.m. wake up. And you can imagine how then I felt at 6:30 in the morning when I was getting up, having drunk a bottle or two of wine, plus having had a sleeping tablet. I started to become very anxious, overthinking things. I went to my GP, and at no point did she ask me, how much are you drinking? But was happy to give me a script for anti-anxiety meds, which I now know should never have been mixed with alcohol. Anyway, I finally reached the point where I decided to take a break from alcohol. I was going to do 21 days, and I ended up doing 100 because everything was different. Everything changed. Like, Lauren, this was the first time in my life that I had had an extended break from alcohol since the age of 14, other than pregnancy, when I was very hormonal anyway. So that hadn't really given me a glimpse of who I was without alcohol. And this was this first time of going, God, this is what it's like to wake up every morning having had 8 hours sleep without booze or a sleeping tablet. This is what it's like to get a natural dopamine high from exercise. This is what it's like to have mental clarity and energy and not wake up and your first thought be, oh, well, you're a loser. You drank last night and you said you weren't going to. Instead, that first feeling in the morning being a sense of pride and a sense of confidence and kind of like, look at me go. And so everything started to change. But I couldn't imagine never drinking again. I got to 100 days, and the feedback from lots of people in my life was, well, are you still not drinking? When are you going to drink again? So I picked up a drink thinking I'll be a moderate drinker now. I've taken 100 days off. I clearly don't have a problem. So now I'll be able to go back to drinking like a normal person. And we all know where that goes. And so very quickly I was back to drinking the same level as before. But I never, ever forgot how I felt that 100 days. I never forgot what that taught me. And finally, April 2019, I just got sick and tired of feeling sick and tired all the time. And I decided a life without alcohol was going to be a better life for me. So I had my last drink. I then went into therapy, did tons of work on myself. And then I retrained to become a grey area drinking coach, a menopause coach, a health and wellness coach. And since January 2021, I've been supporting individuals, predominantly women, all over the world to change their relationship with alcohol and to create a life that they love, where they don't miss alcohol. And because people can take a break, but if all you're doing is crossing off the days and feel like you're missing out, that's very different to creating an absolute life that you love, where you don't want or need to drink.
Yeah. Wow. What a great summary. And um, what I really appreciate about your book, I mean, I think first of all, you describe the pressures of motherhood so honestly and so transparently and so correctly, I would say. Being also a mother of two kids, I was reading, going, "Yep, yep, yep, man, yeah, this is right." And you speak with such open honesty, and also describe like just some heartbreaking stories. That you have a story about your son waking you up in the morning to go to cricket, and you couldn't take him because of being intoxicated. And I think the other story that really hit me was about going to pick up a prescription, and you had fallen and hurting yourself drinking, but the pharmacist passed you a card for domestic violence people, and how like ashamed you felt about that. And And I wonder, like, first of all, it was so powerful to share those kinds of experiences. Were there other experiences along the way where you said, gosh, this is something I need to change? Or did it just kind of hit you at once?
Like looking back, at the time, I'd have said to you, I don't have a problem with alcohol. I just like drinking and it doesn't impact my life negatively. And so therefore, I don't have an issue. I never spent days in bed throwing up. I never had terrible hangovers. I didn't wake up in the morning with trembling hands needing to have a drink, which is what, in my mind, that was the only person that had a problem with alcohol, was if they did that. And because I could take alcohol-free days, I basically told myself I don't have a problem. But in my soul, like deep within me, there were definitely a couple of whispers. There were definitely a couple of moments of going, this isn't good. Like,
Mhm.
what are you doing, Sarah? But I just shoved them down because I didn't want to hear it, because hearing it meant acknowledging it, and I wasn't ready. I simply wasn't ready to even acknowledge what that would mean. But I do remember, like, um, there's a very quite a famous lady in the UK who's a bit older than me called Sadie Frost, and she was like friends with like Kate Moss, and was, you know, this kind of rebel who had this drug alcohol fueled lifestyle. And then I remember reading an article when I was in the thick of my drinking about how she'd taken a year off alcohol, and I remember reading it and being like, wow, people do that. And like, she's really cool and she's done that. And feeling like a little bit in awe. And it planted a seed, but it wasn't until years later that I acted on that. But it definitely, I think those kinds of things do plant seeds for people, even when we don't realize it.
Yeah, yeah, kind of gradual along the way. Well, and you described this concept of a gray area drinker. Can you elaborate more for our audience? Like, what does that what does that look like? What's a
Yeah.
gray area drinker?
I think it's helpful to consider someone's drinking on a scale of 1 to 10. So, one being someone who doesn't drink, or maybe they have a glass of champagne at a wedding once a year and that's their alcohol consumption. And 10 being someone that end stage physical dependency. So, someone who does wake up in the morning with trembling hands and needs to have a drink, and someone who needs medical supervision to withdraw safely from alcohol. So, you've got a 1 and a 10. Most people don't actually sit at either end of those scale. And grey area drinking is talking about that middle level. So about a 4 to an 8 on that scale. So someone who is high functioning. So they can take an alcohol free day. They don't have to drink in the morning, but they're still, alcohol's very present in their life. They can't imagine life without alcohol, and they're using it for something. Because people that don't have a problem with alcohol, they don't use alcohol for anything. They just have a glass of wine every now and then to enjoy red wine with their steak or whatever. Whereas people who've moved into that grey area, it's kind of like, oh, I've had an argument with my husband, I need a drink. Like, oh, I'm so stressed, I need a drink. We've started getting to that point where alcohol is our solution to whatever the adversity or the discomfort is that we're experiencing in that moment. But it's very subtle grey area drinking, because as you all know, like, it starts off, oh, I'm just going to have a glass. And then because we build up tolerance to alcohol, one becomes two, and then two becomes three. And before we know it, we're having a bottle perhaps most nights. Maybe we're going on to opening the second bottle. But we've done that very, very gradually over the time. So number one, our body has adjusted over time. So we're not getting those terrible, terrible hangovers. And number two, I do feel like we're now living in a society where alcohol use, particularly for women, is being normalized. It's being promoted as self-care. It's being shared in Facebook groups and WhatsApp groups and memes that mum needs wine. And so we've kind of got to this point where women across the world are justifying their alcohol use because the message we're receiving is constantly being reinforced that, particularly for mums, alcohol is what we need to relax, to unwind, and it's our reward at the end of a busy day. And I don't know in the States at the moment, but over here in Australia, as we approach Mother's Day, it's disgusting what I'm
Mhm.
starting to see in terms of gifts. And I shudder when I think about those little girls going and buying those gifts. There's a very famous nightwear store over here that sells pajamas and nighties and dressing gowns and things. They've just launched their Mother's Day campaign, Lauren, and it's honestly, it's horrible. It's just pajamas covered in wine glasses with wine down time. like wine, WINE written, and then the wording on their website around, oh, it just makes me feel so uncomfortable. But so this, I think, is where for me, I justified my drinking because everywhere I looked, the message I was getting was that's what women do to cope with life.
Yeah, and you call it. I love the what you called it. Pink messaging and pink drinks. Kind of around like that push to advertise alcohol more heavily to women. And you know what I found probably the most powerful evidence in your book to stop or quit drinking was really all of the health reasons that you cited. I mean, I think for anybody who is questioning their relationship with alcohol or doesn't think it's necessarily impairing, even when you read all of the stuff that you have cited, it's really powerful. I mean, some of the stuff that stuck out to me was 15% increased risk in breast cancer just with regular alcohol use. I think there was a 6-time increase in oral cancer. The World Health Organization labeling alcohol as a group 1 carcinogen in the same class as asbestos, tobacco, radiation. I mean, that to me was just so like shocking, even for, somebody who considers himself maybe, drink here or there. Can you talk kind of more about that summary and that growing body of evidence that's really showing that no amount of alcohol is safe?
Yeah. So I think Canada's the first country that's come out to say no amount of alcohol is safe. And every country has different limits around what they recommend as being the safe amount. So it is terribly confusing. So a couple of facts. Alcohol's now been related to 60 different conditions, health conditions, illnesses, and diseases. 30 of them had never before been linked to alcohol. The link to alcohol and breast cancer is growing there now. Depending on which research you look at, 20% of breast cancer diagnoses are directly caused by alcohol. And anything, if we have more than 3 standard drinks, which is a small glass of wine, not a big glass of wine, 3 standard drinks per week, anything above that increases your risk of breast cancer by 15%. And that percentage increases for every additional drink above the 3 per week. It's really interesting, Lauren, because last week, The Lancet, which is the most respected medical journal in the world, they reported their findings for a breast cancer commission. And the findings are confronting. They have said by 2040 that they predict 3 million women a year will be diagnosed with breast cancer and 1 million will go on to die. And they have said these statistics are not inevitable. And what they said was, in order to ensure that we don't have that inevitability, we have to step in and intervene now. And one of the interventions that they have recommended is that policymakers, meaning the government, bans the commercial marketing of products directly linked to causing breast cancer, such as alcohol. Now, this is huge for the Lancet to come out and say someone needs to stop directly marketing alcohol in order to lower the rate of breast cancer is huge. And so it'll be very interesting to see what comes of that, because we know in the US alone, and I state this in my book, that $6 billion a year is spent on the marketing of alcohol. So we're up against a big, big, big machine that is out there every single day spending $6 billion to cleverly market this product to make us feel like we're going to have a less than life if we don't consume their products. But whether policy change does come into this will be interesting.
Yeah. What do you make of, in fact, I'm anticipating your response, but the fact that, as you mentioned, Canada has recently changed their guidelines. I guess 2023, you said in their book, they had said their recommendation is no amount is safe, and you really should not consume more than 2 drinks per week. Whereas in the US, our CDC guidelines and our NIDA guidelines are still 1 drink a day for men. No, 2 drinks a day for men, 1 drink a day for women, which comes out to like 7 for women and 14 for men. What do you make? I mean, being American, I like to pretend like we pride ourselves in being kind of like on the forefront of guidance that is correct. What do you make of the fact that Canada has switched and the US has not updated our guidelines despite this growing body of evidence?
I think there's a lot of money to be made from alcohol, right? And the other thing to say on that is, the US says one drink a day for women, but they're talking about one standard drink, which for people drinking wine is a very, very small glass of wine. There is nobody out there doing that. So most people, when they're pouring a glass of wine themselves at home, it's the equivalent of 2 units.
Mm,
So automatically they're having 14 units and not 7 if they're having that one glass a day. Alcohol use disorder is described as 14 units a week or more.
mhm.
So even someone that's having one glass a day of a self-serve size, which is usually a larger glass of wine, is would be categorized as alcohol use disorder.
Yeah. Yeah. Great point. Great point. One of the other things I love about your book is you not only talk about the dangers and make a very compelling case, really, for no alcohol, but you talk a lot about replacement behaviors and what things people can do differently and really concrete steps people can put in their life. If you were kind of summarizing, 2 to 3 minutes of what would be the most helpful, most important advice for people maybe who have thought about quitting or have stopped but are struggling to maintain sobriety, what would be some of your most helpful tips for some of those replacement behaviors?
Yeah. So definitely read my book because it will go into a lot more detail, and there's so many checkpoints in there. And the book is called Beyond Booze. I think you can get it everywhere all over the US. It's well, certainly on Amazon anyway. And Barnes and Noble, that's a bookshop over there, right? Which is quite a big bookstore, so that it's available there. So the first thing would be look at the physical side. And I've got a whole chapter in my book on physical cravings. How do we reduce the physical cravings for alcohol, and what do we add in? Because my whole focus with people I work with is, let's focus on what we're gaining by removing alcohol, and let's look at what we're adding in if we take alcohol out. So exercise is absolutely key. I don't know anyone who's gone alcohol free where they haven't added in some exercise, because we get natural dopamine and natural endorphins from exercising, which is really important, because if we're in a dopamine trough, we're going to be looking for dopamine. The brain's going to be searching for dopamine. So we want to be giving the brain that dopamine so it's not going to have cravings. So exercise would be key. Eating really well is key to manage your blood sugars. When we go into a low blood sugar deficit, a lot of my ladies were not eating dinner and they were drinking instead to save calories. But by 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the evening, the blood sugar's so low that then all kind of willpower goes out the window. The third thing is we've got to make sure we're still having fun. Like a lot of us have associated alcohol with fun for such a long time that we've kind of forgotten that there are so many other ways to have fun as an adult. We've just got to start looking for them. So it's really important that we still maintain connection with our friends, but we just do it differently. I always say there is no point going and sitting in the pub watching all your mates get pissed while you're sitting there with a soft drink. And of course, you're going to find that hard. But can you see if your friends will go for a hike with you? Will they go and do an exercise class with you? Can you go do a paint class? Like, there are so many different things that you can start to add in and do differently. But you just got to think outside the box a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, and leaning into the sober community, that's why my communities, I think, are so powerful, because in a world where alcohol is present everywhere and most of our friends might be drinking a lot of the time and we can feel very alone, having connection with other alcohol-free people at the same time can be so helpful.
Yeah, yeah. What do you make of, there seems to be a growing industry around non-alcoholic replacement drinks. Do you find those to be helpful for some of your clients or not? Or what are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, so I have a saying, which is keep the ritual, change the ingredient. And so if at 5 o'clock on a Friday, you've always had a glass of champagne, then maybe we can try adding in an alcohol-free champagne and see if that works for you. And honestly, for I'd say 70, 80% of my ladies, it's helped enormously.
Mm,
The I would say it depends where you are on that scale. If we go back to that scale of 1 to 10, if you're nudging up towards the top end of that scale, it might be really triggering for you to have an alcohol-free drink.
mm,
Whereas if you're in the mid to lower end of that scale, it usually works an absolute treat. So it's just about noticing. It's having an alcohol-free drink and noticing, well, did it work? Did that
Mm.
scratch the itch? Did that take away the craving? And I find for lots of my clients, and I've supported thousands and thousands of people now to change their relationship with alcohol, they would say that they lean on the alcohol-free drinks quite heavily at the start, but as time goes by, they actually go, "No, I don't need it so much." But it really helps them at the beginning, where they've got that trigger of, "I always drink at 5 o'clock when I'm cooking, so okay, let's have an alcohol-free drink instead and see if that works." And so often it does.
And that's so fascinating to think that it would help for people lower end on the spectrum and maybe potentially not be a good idea for people on the higher end of the spectrum for the reasons you said. I had never thought about that, but that makes a lot of sense. Well, as we're starting to wrap up here, what would be your take home message that you want people to get from this conversation and also from your book?
Yeah, and I think what I really wanted to come through from my book was that although it's full of practical tools and strategies and so many of them, it's the message that a life without alcohol is not a less than life. So I've been reflecting a lot this week as I come up to my 5 years of being alcohol free. That's half a decade. And someone said to me, "So what are the benefits?" And this is what I just keep coming back to is I sleep all night. I have such self-confidence and self-belief now. I have a completely different relationship with my kids. I have smashed goals in my life that were just pipe dreams when I was still drinking. I'm prioritizing my health. I've gone back and studied, like so much has been added in to make my life richer and more fulfilled as a result of that one decision to remove alcohol. So for anyone listening who's thinking about it, I always say, give yourself the opportunity, take a break. Just take a break and see how that makes you feel. Like, notice, is my sleep better? Is my energy better? Am I calmer with my kids? Does my inner critic and that negative self-talk start to disappear? Do I start putting my hand up for promotions at work because I've got more mental clarity and energy and motivation? Like, just start noticing, take that break and notice, because even if we're just drinking a small amount, it disrupts our sleep, it causes anxiety, and it will never ever allow you to show up as your absolute best self. And I think we all get to that point where we become very aware that life is not forever, life is not infinite. This is our one precious life. And am I living it in a way that I would be proud of when I'm 90 years old? And if I'm not, then perhaps taking that one break from alcohol could give me a glimpse of what life might be like without it.
Yeah. Man, I love that quote. You said, I have smashed goals that were just pipe dreams when I was drinking. That is so beautiful and so well said. Well, thank you so much for spending the time with us this evening. We're so honored to have you. I hope you guys listening have found this discussion really enlightening. I will say, as an addiction psychiatrist, I've read probably 50 books on alcohol, and I think this is probably the most convincing on changing your relationship with alcohol. So I give it 5 stars. I think whether you're male, female, everybody should read it out there, particularly women. It gives such color, I think, and such depth and such honesty to the experience that women with alcohol have in their life. And what I would just add is, read Sarah's book. It's called Beyond Booze. It really gives a great picture that you're not alone on your journey to recovery. This is very meaningful, that it's very doable. And Sarah gives a great kind of outline on how to do that. So thank you so much for joining us. And guys, until next time, take care, stay well, do something for yourself, do something nice for yourself, and follow us on social media. Have a great night.